Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Lily, and today we are continuing the tale of the Body Snatcher. So, in the past episode, we learned about just a tiny bit about the mysterious Dr. Marfano, and that was that people regret to meet him. Feats also hate his guts so much that he threw the money he offered him to the rain. So today, let's learn a little bit more about this mysterious doctor and about the tale of the gruesome story of the Body Snatcher, shall we? But before we get to that, I have a request for you. Tell me everything you think about this story in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe. So let's go to the video, shall we? So we left up by our party sitting again in the parlor of the George. We three turned to our places in the parlor with the big red fire and 4 clear candles. And as we recapitulated what had happened, the first chill of our surprise soon changed into a glow curiosity. We sat late. It was the latest session I have known in the old George. Each man, before we parted, has his theory that he was bound to prove, and none of us had any nearest business in this world than to track out the past of our condemned companion and surprise the secret that he shared with the great London doctor. It is no great boast, but I believe I was a better hand at worming out a story than either of my fellows at the George, and perhaps there is now no other man alive who could narrate to you the following full and unnatural events. In his young days, Feeds studied medicine in the schools of Edinburgh. He had talent of a kind, the talent that picks up swiftly what it hears and readily retails it for its own. He worked little at home, but he was civil, attentive, and intelligent in the presence of his masters. They soon picked him out as a lad who listened closely and remembered well. Nay, strange as it seemed to me when I first heard it, he was in those days well favored and pleased by his exterior. There was, at that period, a certain extramural teacher of anatomy, whom I shall here designate by the letter K. His name was subsequently too well known. The man who bore it sculled through the streets of Edinburgh in disguise, while the mob that applauded at the execution of Burke called loudly for the blood of his employer. But Mr. K was then at the top of his vogue. He enjoyed a popularity due partly to his own talent and address, partly to the incapacity of his rival, the university professor. The students at least swore by his name, and Fitz believed himself, and was believed by others, to have laid the foundation of success when he had acquired the favor of his meteorically famous man. Mr. K was a bon vivant as well as an accomplished teacher. He liked and sly illusions no less than a careful preparation. In both capacities, Feats enjoy and deserve his notice, and by the second year of his attendance, he held the half-regular position of second demonstrator or sub-assistant in his class. In this capacity, the charge of the theater and lecture room devolved in a particular upon his shoulders. He had to answer for the cleanliness of the premises and the conduct of the other students, and it was a part of his duties to supply, receive, and divide the various subjects. It was with a view to his last, at that time very delicate, affair that he was launched by Mr. K in the same wind and at last in the same building with the dissecting rooms. Here, after a night of turbulent pleasures, his hand still tottering, his sight still misty and confused, he will be called out of bed in the black hours before the winter dawn by the unclean and desperate interlopers who supplied the table. He would open the door to this man, since infamous throughout the land. He would help them with their tragic burden, pay them their sordid price, and remained alone when they were gone with the unfriendly relics of humanity. For such a scene, he would return to snatch another hour of two of slumber, to repair the abuses of the night and refresh himself for the labors of the day. Few lads could have been more insensible to the impressions of a life thus passed among the ensigns of morality. His mind was closed against all general considerations. He was incapable of interest in the fates of fortunes of another, the slave of his own desires and low ambitions. Cold, light, and selfish in the last resort, he had that modicum of prudence, miscalled morality, which kept a man from inconvenient drunkenness or punishable theft. He coveted, besides, a measure of consideration from his masters and his fellow pupils, and he had no desire to fail conspicuously in the external parts of life. Thus, he made it his pleasure to gain more distinction than his studies, and day after day rendered unimpeachable eye service to his employer, Mr. K. For his day of work he indemnified himself to nights of roaring, blackguardly enjoyment, and when the balance has been struck, the organ that he called his conscience declared its self-content. The supply of subjects was a continual trouble to him as well as to his master. In that large and busy class, the raw material of the anatomist kept perpetually running out, and the business thus rendered necessary was not only unpleasant in itself, but threatened dangerous consequences to all who were concerned. It was the policy of Mr. K to ask no questions in his dealings with the trade. "They bring the body, and we pay the price," he used to say, dwelling on the alliterations quid pro quo. And again, and somewhat profoundly, "Ask no questions," he will tell his assistants, "for conscience sake." There was no understanding that the subjects were provided by the crime of murder. Had that idea been broached to him in words, he would have recoiled in horror. But the lightness of his speech upon so grave a matter was, in itself, an offense against good manners, and a temptation to the men with whom he dwelt. Fitz, for instance, had often remarked to himself upon the singular freshness of the bodies. He had been struck again and again by the hangdog, abominable looks of the ruffians who came to him before the dawn, and putting things together clearly in his private thoughts, he perhaps attributed a meaning too immoral, too categorical to the unguarded counsels of his master. He understood his duty, in short, to have three branches: to take what was brought, to pay the price, and to avert the eyes from any evidence of crime. One November morning, this policy of silence was put sharply to the test. He had been awoken all night with a racking toothache, pacing his room like a caged beast, on throwing himself in fury on his bed, and he had fallen at last into a profound, uneasy slumber that so often follows on a night of pain. When he was awoken by the third and fourth angry repetition of the concerted signal, there was a thin, bright moonshine. It was bitter cold, windy, and frosty. The town had not yet awoken, but an indefinable stir already preluded the noise and business of the day. The ghouls had come later than usual, and they seemed more than usually eager to be gone. Fitz, sick with sleep, lighted them upstairs. He heard their grumbling Irish voices through a dream, and as they stripped the sack from their sad merchandise, he leaned dozing, with his shoulder propped against the wall. He had no shake himself to find the men their money. As he did so, his eyes lightened of the dead face. He stared. He looked 2 steps near, with the candle rising. "God Almighty!" he cried. "That is Jane Galbraith!" The men answered nothing, but they shoved near the door. "I knew her,"
I tell you, I know her. I tell you, he continued. She was alive and hearty yesterday. It is impossible she can be dead. It is impossible you should have got this body fairly. Sure, sir, you're mistaken entirely, said one of the men. But the other looked Fitz darkly in the eyes and demanded the money on the spot. It was impossible to misconceive the threat or to exaggerate the danger. The lad's heart failed him. He stammered some excuses, counted out the sum, and saw his hateful visitors depart. No sooner were they gone than he hastened to confirm his doubts. By a dozen unquestionable marks, he identified the girl he had jested with the day before. He saw, with horror, marks upon her body that might well betoken violence. A panic seized him, and he took refuge in his room. There he reflected at length over the discovery that he had made, considered soberly by bearing of Mr. K's instructions and the danger to himself of interference in so serious a business, and at last, in sore perplexity, determined to wait for the advice of his immediate superior, the class assistant. This was a young doctor, Wolfe McFarnell, a high favorite among all the reckless students, clever, dissipate, and unscrupulous to the last degree. He had traveled and studied abroad. His manners were agreeable and a little forward. He was an authority on the stage, skillful on the ice or the links with skates or golf club. He dressed with nice audacity, and to put with the finishing touch upon his glory, he kept a gig and a strong-throated horse. With Fitz, he was on terms of intimacy. Indeed, their relative positions called for some community of life, and when subjects were scarce, the pair will drive far into the country in Marfanel's gig, visiting and desecrate some lonely graveyard, and return before dawn with their bounty to the door of the dissecting room. On that particular morning, McFarnell arrived somewhat earlier than his wont. Fitz heard him and met him on the stairs, told him his story, and showed him the cause of his alarm. McFarnell examined the marks on her body. Yes, he said with a nod. It looks fishy. Well, what should I do? Asked Fitz. Do? Repeated the other. Do you want to do anything? Let's say as soon as mended, I should say. Someone else might recognize her, objected Fitz. She was a well-known. She was as well known as the Castle Rock. Well, hope not, said McFarnell. And if anybody does, well, you didn't. Don't you see? And there's an end. The fact is, this has been going on too long. Stir up the mud, and you'll get Kay into the most unholy trouble. You be in a shocking box yourself. So will I, if you come to that. I should like to know how any one of us will look, or what the devil we should have to say for ourselves in any Christian witness box. For me, there's one thing certain, that, practically speaking, all our subjects have been murdered. McFarnell! Cried Fitz. Come on, sneered the other, as if you hadn't suspected it yourself. Suspecting is one thing, and proof is another. Yes, I know, and I am as sorry as you are. This should have come here, tapping the body with his cane. The next best thing for me is not to recognize it, and, he added coldly, I don't. You may if you please. I don't dictate, but I think a man of the world will do as I do, and I may add, I fancy that is what Kay would look for at our hands. The question is, why did he choose us two for his assistants? And I answer, because he didn't want all wives. This was the tone of all others to affect the mind of a lad like Fitz. He agreed to imitate McFarnell. The body of the unfortunate girl was dully dissected, and no one remarked or appeared to recognize her. One afternoon, when his day of work was over, Fitz dropped
into a popular tavern and found McFarnell sitting with a stranger. This was a small man, very pale and dark, with cold black eyes. The cut of his features gave him a promise of intellect, and refinement was but feebly realized in his manners, for he proved upon a nearest acquaintance coarse, vulgar, and stupid. He exercised, however, a very remarkable control over McFarnell, issued orders like the great Bashaw, became inflamed at the least discussion or delay, and commented rudely on the servility with which he was obeyed. This most offensive person took a fancy to Fitz on the spot, plied him with drinks, and honored him with unusual confidence on his past career. If a tenth part of what he confessed were true, he was a very longsome rogue, and the lad's vanity was tickled by the attention of so expired a man.
I'm a pretty bad fellow myself, the stranger remarked, but McFarnell is the boy. Toddy McFarnell, I called him. Toddy, order your friend another glass.
Or it might be,
Toddy, you jump up and shut the door. Toddy hates me, he said again. Oh, yes, Toddy, you do.
Don't you call me that, Don't you call me that confound name, growled McFarnell.
Hear him. Did you ever see that lads play knife? He would like to do that all over my body, remarked the stranger.
We medicals have a better way than that, said Fitz. When we dislike a dead friend of ours, we dissect him.
McFarnell looked up sharply and thought his jests were scarcely to his mind. The afternoon passed. Gray, for that was the stranger's name, invited Fitz to join them at dinner, ordered a feast so sumptuous that the tavern was thrown into a commotion, and when all was done, commanded McFarnell to settle the bill. It was late before they separated. The man Gray was incapably drunk. McFarnell, sobered by his fury, shewed the cud of the money he had been forced to squander and the slight he has been obliged to swallow. Fitz, with various liquors singing in his head, returned home with devious footsteps and a mind entirely in absence. Next day, McFarnell was absent from class, and Fitz smiled to himself as he imagined him to still squiring the intolerable Gray from tavern to tavern. As soon as the hour of liberty had struck, he posted from place to place in quest of his last night's companions. He could find them, however, nowhere, so returned early to his room, went early to bed, and slept the sleep of the just. At 4 a.m, he was awakened by the well-known signal. Descending to the door, he was filled with astonishment to find McFarnell with his gig, and in the gig one of those long and ghastly packages with which he was so well acquainted.
"What?"
he cried.
"Have you been out alone? How did you manage?"
But McFarnell silenced him roughly, bidding him turn to business. When they had got the body upstairs and laid it on the table, McFarnell made a first as he were going away. Then he paused and seemed to hesitate, and then,
"You had better look at his face,"
said he in tones of constraint.
"You had better,"
he repeated, as Fitz only stared at him in wonder.
"But where and how and when did you come by it?"
cried the other.
"Look at the face,"
was the only answer. Fitz was staggered. Strange doubt assailed him. He looked for the young doctor, to the body, and then back again. At last, with a start, he did as he was bidden. He had almost expected the sight that met his eyes, and yet the shock was cruel. To see, fixed in the rigidity of death and naked of that coarse layer of sackcloth, the man whom he had left well clad and full of meat and sin upon the threshold of a tavern, awoke, even in the toughest feats, some of the terrors of conscience. It was a crusty which re-echoed in his soul, that two whom he had known should have come to light upon the icy tables. Yet these were only secondary thoughts. His first concern regarded Wolf. Unprepared for a challenge so momentous, he knew not how to look his comrade in the face. He durst not meet his eyes, and he had neither words nor voice at his command. It was MacFarnell himself who made the first advance. He came up quickly behind and laid his hand gently and but firmly on the other's shoulder.
"Richardson," said he, "may have the head."
Now Richardson was a student who had long been anxious for that portion of the human subject to dissect. There was no answer, and the murderer resumed.
"You must pay me. Your accounts, you see, must Stadley."
Fitz found a voice, the ghost of his own.
"Pay you?" he cried. "Pay you for what?" "Why, yes, of course you must. By all means, and on every possible account you must," returned the other. "I dare not give it for nothing. You dare not take it for nothing. It will compromise us both. This is another case like Jane Galbraith. The more things are wrong, the more we must act if it's all were right. Where does old K keep his money?"
"There," answered Fitz hoarsely, pointing to a cupboard in the corner.
"Give me the key then,"
said the other calmly, holding out his hand. There was an instant hesitation, and the die was cast. MacFarnell could not suppress a nervous twitch, the infinitesimal mark of an immense relief, and he felt the key between his fingers. He opened the cupboard, brought out a pen and ink and a paper book that stood in one compartment, and separated from the funds in a drawer a sum suitable to the occasion. "Now look here," he said. "There is a payment made. First proof of your good faith. First step to your security. You have now to clinch it by a second. Enter the payment in your book, and then you, for your part, may defy the devil." Okay, guys, so we are in the midst of a story where two doctors, fellow companions, and assistants for Mr. K were getting bodies, not in the most moral or safest ways. At first, Fitz thought, they're just grave robbing, right? But no, they were murdering people and getting those bodies for a very good price. Now, Fitz is in a corner trying to think, do I escape this or do I continue? And MacFarnell and his buddy don't look quite right, do they? Okay, so I'm gonna end it here, and I wish to know in the comments, where do you think this story is going? How did Fitz escape this not very good situation in his life of a doctor apprentice? I will see you in the next one. Take care, and I love you. Bye bye.